Okay, so little about me, take it back about 14 years or so. I'm 27. I started working out to get a little better at baseball, trying to improve my game through that. And then it just really kind of turned into a second passion. I played nothing but baseball growing up. And then the gym kind of turned into my second home. I really, really started to enjoy it, not only just to get better at baseball, but I just like the process. Um, came across some guys on YouTube that really got me like interested in it, kind of training the right way, and just really kind of took my game to a whole new level. Not my fitness game, not my baseball game. That game kind of fizzled out a little bit, but I realized kind of towards like my senior year of high school, I really, really enjoyed being in the gym and kind of like helping some friends out and teaching people. So ended up going to college for exercise science and sports studies at the University of Tampa. Um, while I was there, I got into both CrossFit and also a little bit of more sports specific training for people. I did an internship with the strength and conditioning coach that worked at the University of Tampa. So I got really kind of in depth with the athletes there, and they had a really good D2 program. So I got to see some pretty good athletes, and then also as I was starting to get into CrossFit myself and getting a little competitive, I started to see like the where fitness can go when you really hone in on it and not just kind of like do it as something that's fun. So I saw progress from other athletes doing their part, and then I was enjoying my CrossFit and my weightlifting and started to see some progress through there, of just kind of, like I said, honing in on some serious athletics physically. And then I graduated college in 2011. I lived in Tampa for about a year after that, and then I ended up moving home to be the head coach at the gym that I currently work at now. We were just a CrossFit gym, and we've since rebranded to be a little bit more of a group fitness facility. So we run your traditional style boot camp classes, and we also have our CrossFit classes, which a lot of stuff going on in the CrossFit world right now, so that's changing a little bit. But yeah, so we'll put CrossFit in air quotes right now. But that type of style training is something I was always interested in. I competed in Olympic weightlifting myself a little bit, but I moved back to my hometown, and I'd say 3 years ago now at this point, the baseball coach who I played for is still at the high school, and he knows what I do. So he contacted me once to come do the winter workouts for the baseball team there. And that's what kind of like really sparked my interest and desire to work with athletes, which I had done before, but kind of really turned into my passion lately. And now I'm doing that for the most part, or a lot of that at least.
Okay. Okay, perfect. So my first question was, how did you become involved in it? Which you've covered that. So let's move to the next question then, which is, you're coaching these athletes at a pivotal point in their athletic development, right? Mm-hmm. So give us, what are your principles, your general principles for athlete training? Tell us about that.
So my main principles are, and I think a lot of this comes from just the age range that I work with, is I just want to get them overall strong. Unless you're a swimmer, or I'd say like a cross country runner, because those are extreme endurance sports. If you play lacrosse, hockey, football, basketball, baseball, any sport. So for a lot of the kids that work with me, at least, I'm getting them, they're working out for the first time in their entire life. So I don't need you to do top of the pyramid hockey specific training. We just need to get strong, learn how to squat, learn how to jump, learn how to land, learn how to press, and all those types of things. So a lot of the kids that I work with, and I'll say around, let's call it 13 to 16 years old, we're just focusing on getting strong. And a lot of that is too, and I know we're going to talk about this a little bit later, is kids are very specific, and they're sitting all day. They have a lot of the similar injuries. So again, I don't get too specific due to the fact that a lot of the kids are a lot more similar than they might think. Even if one plays hockey and one plays football, they're sitting all day and they have weak lower back, weak hips, or tight hips. Their glutes don't fire. They don't know how to squat yet. They don't know how to press yet. Their shoulders are rounded forward. So we tend to do a lot of the same things, and that's just get strong, because there are so many kids that are hurt now who shouldn't be. If you're 14 years old, you should not be hurt, right? Your back should not be hurting you. So we need to work on just setting an amazing foundation with certain things. And again, I know we'll talk about some of those certain things later, but my main principle with them is I just want to get them well-rounded, overall strong, and then like really strong, and then even double down on that. And then when you get really, really strong, we could start focusing a little bit more on hockey specific or baseball specific stuff. But my principle is I just don't think kids are overall strong enough, and a lot of them are getting hurt. So I try and tackle that aspect the best that I can.
Yeah, and one thing which I think which is really interesting that you mentioned is, you know, you teach them how to move, how to jump, how to land. It's so funny, you know. Obviously, I'm an orthopedic surgeon. I'm a sports guy, so I do a lot of ligament work and I do knee reconstructions. And we have so many kids. They're bigger, faster, stronger. They have great sports specific skills, but yet they do not know how to absorb shock or impact, do not know how to land. And people go, oh, geez, you jump up and you land. And that's it. That's all there is to it. But no, there's more to it than that. And so I love that you talk about and you include that in one of your principles, right? Not only is it important to learn how to generate power, but it is important to learn how to decelerate and absorb power, change direction, right? And landing is such an important part of that.
Yeah.
Now, so let me ask you another question now, okay? Because of this particular group of athletes. And I remember, if I think back to myself, you know, in high school, it's like, yo, man, I want to get yoked. I'm going to get jacked, right? So let's talk for a second. Athlete training versus bodybuilding. And so for the average athlete, or for the average high school student, says, I don't want to be an athlete. I just want to bodybuild. Well, how do you see those two things as different? And are they different? And, you know, what do you say to the person who says, well, I'm not an athlete, I just want to get bigger?
If they have already kind of like, you know, I kind of classify myself in a sense as like, I just really, really enjoy training kids. It just so happens that 99.9999% of them play a sport. So it turns into a lot of that. At the end of the day, if a kid comes to me, he's like, yeah, I don't play sports, I just want to get big, I'm all for it. I love it. The main thing that's really going to change is the rep ranges. You know, if your goal is to just bodybuild, you got to be in that 8 to 15 rep range. If your goal is to get stronger, we're going to be in that 1 to 6 rep range. We're still going to do a lot of the similar things because, again, a lot of the kids we're still going over those basic movements, you know? So we're still going to bench press. We're still going to squat. We're still going to deadlift and split squat and lunge and curl and tricep extension and all those type of things. We're still going to do all of those. And I do those with all of them. Because I do still want, you know, the kid that just wants to get yoked, I still need him to be a little strong. And the kid that just wants to be strong and hit a baseball 450 feet still needs that muscle to balance out that strength, right? Kind of like how you were just saying, a bunch of people can give out a ton of force, but they can't absorb it. And I think building a lot of muscle, like hypertrophy type of training does play a part in that. So you'll see a lot of like hybrid style training coming from me, where it's a little bit of mix of both. You know, I kind of try and read the kid the best that I can. And sometimes I'm in groups, 2 or 3 kids. So I try and read them the best that I can. Do they kind of like squatting and deadlifting a little bit more? Maybe they like the bench pressing a little more. And we're definitely going to do a little bit of everything and a little bit of both, because I do think it's important at that age to just explore all aspects of fitness. But if a kid just comes in, he's like, hey, I just want big biceps and a six pack, I'm all for it. If he wants to hit a baseball 450 feet, I'm all for it. But we are going to do some mix of both. It just depends on how we're going to go about that and where we're going to place the bias.
Okay, perfect. So here's something that's quite applicable right now, right? So we've been on quarantine for the last basically 2.5, almost 3 months, and we've not been able to work out in the gym setting. So is it possible for athletes to train at home and still be able to do the things that are necessary to allow them to prepare themselves for their sport?
Definitely. I think it depends. If there's a little bit of a shift, I believe, in overall fitness. And I'm going to say this in the assumption that kids have no equipment at home, right? Or maybe a little bit. If I'm 17 years old and I'm repping out 405 deadlifts, let's say, for a set of 5, and now I go from that to no equipment, unfortunately, at the end of the day, you're not going to be able to mimic that, right? But there's still definitely things we can do. You know, a lot of very explosive movements require absolutely no equipment. Uphill sprints, jumps, single leg jumps, broad jumps, squat jumps, like kneeling to standing jumps. You can still say extremely explosive. You can still do upper body stuff where you're staying explosive by doing like a plyo push-up where you push yourself off the ground. Unfortunately, some of the strength might tend to go away. It is just kind of something we're going to have to accept. You know, if you were a stud in the weight room, like I said, repping out 300-pound squats, unfortunately, there's no way to mimic that if we're at home and have absolutely no equipment for a 2-3 month span. So we want to try and maybe shift the focus to something else and maybe try and focus on something like, okay, instead of a 405-pound deadlift, let's now shoot for a faster 40-yard dash time or something like that. Or, okay, I was really liking all this bench press and this and that. Okay, let's work on maybe increasing our shoulder and pec endurance. And now we want to see how many push-ups we can do in one shot or how many pull-ups. So there are definitely ways to train. Unfortunately, we do kind of have to like accept the times that we're in. If you have absolutely no access to a weight, some of the strength might go away, but there are definitely other things that we can work on, especially if your sport involves any sort of conditioning. You know, if you're a hockey player, football player, lacrosse player, there's no reason you can't be running sprints outside and doing a bunch of type of HIIT training or any cardio like that. Your endurance can be through the roof coming out of this. Unfortunately, we kind of have to accept the times, and the strength might go away just a little bit.
Okay. So then, and you talked a little bit about this, but let's get a little bit more specific. So if I'm an athlete now and I say, okay, so Pat, I want to work out during quarantine at home. What am I going to do now? So we know general concepts. Okay, I can't lift as heavy. I'm going to have to change my focus due to some of these other things. But give me some tips about specific things that I can do at home, or, you know, types of equipment that I can use at home to mimic what I might be doing in the gym or otherwise.
Cool. Yeah, I love that. You know, if you have a lot of, I found this personally when quarantine first started, if you have some time on your hands, you can get pretty damn creative around your house. A chair or a bench is going to be one of your best friends. You can do Bulgarian split squats on them, and you could do single leg glute bridges or even a regular glute bridge, which is going to be some of the better things that you can do to maximize force when we're in a situation like this with absolutely no weight, you know? So like really, really slow, eccentric Bulgarian split squats with your foot on a chair, that's going to light your legs up, you know? You could do a single leg glute bridge so your shoulders are on the chair, you know? Your one foot's on the ground, you're shooting your hips up to the ceiling. You can go up there, you can hold for a second, you can come down real slow. Like I was saying before, sprints. And my personal favorite that I've been pushing a lot is the heavy backpack. You know, if I know you've seen it, you know, but I've adopted the heavy backpack. I'm a big fan of sandbags for kids just in general. I think just an odd object. It's like, here, just throw this thing around until you're bored type of training. So I've been a huge fan of the heavy sandbag. Just, you know, you fill up a backpack with literally anything you could find. Sand would be ideal because it's super dense. You can fit a lot in there. Basically anything you do with a dumbbell or a barbell, it might be a little bit awkward, but you can do it with a heavy backpack. You can squat, lunge, split squat. You could do a clean and jerk. You can bench press it. You can bent over row. You can shoulder press. You can do just about everything with it. The main thing is just making sure it's heavy enough, and you got to stuff that thing. You got to go to Home Depot. You got to buy some sand, a lot of it, and you got to put as much of it as you can. I have a backpack that I filled with sand, and it came out to like 57 pounds, you know? Right. And like, that's heavy for me. If I'm 14 years old, that's the heaviest thing in the world. You could take some sand out. Like, you can get really creative with it. It comes down to just thinking outside the box a little bit and the desire.
Okay, perfect. Now, before I move on to the next question, something that you mentioned there, I just want to spend a little more time on. So, you know, you talked about a lot of single leg exercises, right? Bulgarian split squats and single leg glute bridge. Now, what are your thoughts on single leg work versus tandem leg work for developing strength? And so give us your general thoughts on that. And then since you do use single leg, tell us why.
I'm a huge fan of both, you know, just the way, you know, growing up lifting, I wasn't that educated, I guess you could say, in single leg work. It was a lot of like squat, deadlift, maybe a kettlebell swing that, looking back on it, was probably terrible, and some leg
Yep.
press, and leg extension, and
Okay.
hamstring curls. So I did a lot of that stuff growing up. So I've slowly started to adopt a lot of the single leg work. I think partly as I get older and want to take a little off my body, it's nice. But when it comes to athletes, at least, I tend to teach the two-legged movements first. So first thing we're going to do is learn how to squat on two legs, learn how to squat on, and then learn how to deadlift on two legs. And then we're going to slowly
Yep.
start to go from there, because the single leg work is going to be really good when we're trying to, one, transfer to sport easily. I mean, every single sport, unless you're a swimmer, it's done on one foot.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to be strong, pushing off one foot, forward, left, back, right, all different directions. So we have to be able to do that. And we also want to try and balance ourselves out, because the biggest, I guess you could say, risk to injuries is being imbalanced. You know, if you're a baseball player and you're constantly stepping with that left foot to throw with your right arm, you do that over and over and over again. That left leg's doing pretty good. That right leg's been asleep for quite some time. And it's even something I'm still struggling with, is trying to balance that out. And I
Yep.
have injuries because of that. So I do love both. I think they're great. If we're looking for just overall brute strength, you know, the classic back squat and deadlift is going to be really good for you, but we do have to supplement them with single leg work, like lateral lunges, Cossack squats, split squats, single leg glute bridges, and single leg RDLs, because if we're only doing those two-legged movements, it's not going to transfer as well. And it's also going to bring out some of our imbalances that are just at some point going to turn into injury. It's not if, it's when.
Okay. And also, just to add on to, or just to sort of get some more information about something you just talked about there. So you talked a little bit about, you know, sort of the gold standard, the of leg movements, sort of the tandem two-leg squat, back squat. Now, are you but I've seen in your social media stuff that you are also a big front squatter as well. Now, what are your thoughts on front versus back squat, and how do you use them differently, and in what situations?
I personally, I love front squatting, just having the Olympic weightlifting background. I think it's just a little bit of a bias that I've always had towards it. It's something I'm starting to experiment a little bit more with the younger kids. I tend not to do it only because of the wrists and fingers. And sometimes this is not the most comfortable, especially kind of like I was saying before, as I get, well, a lot of the kids I get are working out for like the first time, are still very new. So I don't need or I don't want necessarily like a bar in front of them that could drop, whatever, land on their elbows or anything. I love both of them.
Yep.
I think front squats are really good, obviously, for that core stability. I think they're also really good for mobility, because they allow people to sit back into their squat just a little bit more. And I think that's one of the things that people tend to look over, is getting strength in those positions, and not just foam rolling until you can't anymore, but actually getting strong in those positions. So if a front squat allows you to sit deeper, I think it's a really, really good mobility piece.
Yep.
And a lot of people will argue, and I'm on both sides. I think if you're squatting, you're doing good. But people will argue the front squat's going to be a little bit more transferable to a sport. But I also, again, like I said, just having the background that I do, I love both of them. I don't prefer one over the other. I tend not to use front squat too much with the younger kids because of the more moving pieces. That's really it.
More technical. It's more things to pay attention to.
Mm-hmm. You
All
know,
right.
and
No,
I
carry
was
on.
going to say, so I'm usually like, you know, if I was seeing somebody 4 or 5 times a week, I would probably throw it in there. I'm usually not. The kids are younger that I'm working with. So, you know, if one thing's going to bother their fingers, I'll move on to something else.
Okay. All right. So let's change gears here a little bit.
Cool.
Because one of the other things that you talk about in your social media and on your YouTube and all that is about childhood obesity and childhood nutrition. So talk to me about, and let's go over your thoughts on childhood obesity, and, you know, how prevalent do you think it is, and what are some of the things that we can do to combat that?
I think it's unfortunately 10 times more prevalent than people think. It's just turned into the new normal. You know, if your kid is a little chubby or overweight, that's just what it is now, unfortunately. And it spews into adults. It's kind of the same thing, you know. No, people like being in shape should be the normal, but it's unfortunately not. Um, so I think it's something that is really it sucks. Like it's the only way I could say it. It just sucks that it's so prevalent because unfortunately when you're 11, all of the things that make that child obese are out of their control. You know, they
Mm-hmm.
don't control their sleep for the most part. They're 11. They're not feeding themselves. Um, they are told what sport to go to, how long to be in school for. They're told that they don't have recess anymore. They're told that if they don't feel like it, they can just sit out in gym class and all these different things. And if they're, you know, if they're not good at a sport, they're still allowed to play it and get a trophy. So like it's unfortunate, but it's these things and these ideas that just get kind of like beaten into their head from a young age, and by the time they get older, it's just normal to them, you know. And it's I think it starts with a bunch of people. I think it's really important for the parents to try and get on them as much as they can to get some good foods in front of them. You know, at the same time, you have to let an 11-year-old be an 11-year-old. He wants to eat a bag of Skittles for dinner. Let him do it once in a while. But it comes down to the parents and the adults in their life that have to put those good foods in front of them and start building those habits, because the habits just aren't formed. That's what it is. You know, I'm talking to 16-year-olds. I'm like, what'd you eat for breakfast? They're like, Frosted Flakes. I'm like, well, what'd you eat for lunch? They're like, nothing. I'm like, well, what'd you eat for dinner? Like, oh, I had a huge meal, and then I had like Doritos at like 11 when I was playing Xbox. And I'm like, what? And I don't know if it's biased. You know, I adapted a healthy lifestyle very early in my life, so I don't know if I'm a little narrow-minded in there, and I think I am for sure. But when I was 15 years old, I made myself a salad because I knew that's what was going to be better for me. Um, so yeah, sorry, I got off on a little bit of a tangent there, but I think
No,
it's
it's that's all
it,
good. But there's two things that you mentioned though that I just want to briefly touch on. So number one, you know, you talked about being okay to sit out physical education or whatever, and I understand not everybody's an athlete. No, so that's all good. Not everybody needs to be Michael Jordan, but
oh, agreed.
you know, I can think back to, because I'm a little bit older than you. When I first went to school, and when I was going to school in the 70s, and as a grade school child, and where physical education, it wasn't something you could sit out. That was a
Yeah.
mandatory part of our daily education, and we did it as a class. And you know, I think that that's important because we had a daily opportunity outside of recess, outside of play, a daily opportunity where we can engage in some kind of physical activity that was structured and was
Mm-hmm.
about us developing basic movement skills, right? And basic fitness, basic physical ability. And so that I think is important. And it's kind of, I look at it as a travesty that, you know, we say to kids, oh, you know, like we can't do that. Oh, you know, Johnny doesn't like to do that. He should sit out. So that's number one. The
Mm-hmm.
other thing is that we have our society. This is just a general critique. We have this thing which you mentioned. Everybody gets a trophy, and I understand that we don't want to alienate people, and we don't want people to feel bad. And if Johnny isn't a good athlete, we shouldn't make him feel bad. So I understand that, but everybody shouldn't get a trophy. And the reason why everybody shouldn't get a trophy is because the moment that you leave your parents' house, the people who care about you and who care about your feelings, they stop. Generally
Mm-hmm.
speaking, you have to
Mm-hmm.
go out into the real world, and the real world doesn't really care if
It does it.
you don't feel good, you don't like it does they it's like, I don't want to be harsh or brutal to people, but it's just like that's the reality. And I tell my own kids this, like your mother and I, we're the ones that care, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody else, they don't generally care. So you
Nope.
saying, "Oh, I don't like this," or "I don't whatever," they people don't like that doesn't matter. right? So we need to prepare. I personally, this is my own personal feeling. We need to prepare people for the real world. We need to prepare our children. It's my job as a parent to make sure that my kids are okay to go out into the real world. And so I need to let them understand that out in the real world, everybody doesn't get a trophy like for
No, they
showing up,
don't.
you know?
Right.
So,
And I think they're actually, both of those points are intertwined, you know? It's like, it's a little bit of coddling. It's like, you know, oh, you don't want to do gym class? That's fine. Just skip it, you know? And that kind of leads into the like, oh, I can just kind of do what I want type of mindset. And then it's just like I said, that coddling where it's just like, oh, here's this trophy. Oh, you didn't do anything and you weren't good. Here's a trophy. You don't want to do gym? Yeah, that's fine. Just sit out. You know, like I didn't want to hand in my math test, but guess what? I had to. Like,
I have to do
why
it.
why can't this person just like, you know, and what I think is tough when it going back to the gym is like, or gym classes, you don't give them an opportunity to explore. And that's really you know, and this is why like when the kids come into me, if they walk in and like, hey, can we do this today? Yup.
I'm
And
down.
two, and we do a million different things. My program, or not program, training with kids probably looks unbelievably random. You know why? Because if he hates squatting with a barbell, but really likes squatting with a sandbag, cool. But if I just shoved back squats down his throat the whole time, he would be like, okay, I don't like this, right? But you never give a kid a chance that, okay, maybe they don't like playing, I don't know, badminton. Maybe they don't like basketball or flag football or this. Oh, we went up to the weight room today and he hopped on the bike and he actually kind of enjoyed that during gym class. Okay, cool. And then next week we're going to play tennis. Oh, he actually kind of liked tennis also. You don't give them the chance to just like, hey, you never know what you might like. And that's exactly why I try and throw as many different things as I can at kids in the gym because you know, they're not going to like everything, but there are definitely some things that they're going to catch on to that they might not have realized. And I think the same thing is going on in gym classes where it's like, you don't give him the chance. He might find out. You know, if you sometimes when you force somebody to do it, like, oh, okay, that was kind of fun. Like,
I know
so
exactly.
yeah,
Exactly.
and
I
that
think I
like
like it.
that's literally it's all it takes. This kid, let's just say you have a kid that doesn't want to do gym class. He could hate every sport under the sun. All right, today we're doing tennis. If you force him to try it, oh, I kind of like tennis. You know what? Maybe I'll play this 3 times a week with my friends. Now this kid has a physical activity and a sport that he's interested in. He's hanging out with friends. He's getting sunshine. Like that tiny little thing could just be a spiral effect that totally changes his life. Now he plays tennis for the rest of his life and he's in good shape.
For sure.
All because
For
you made him
sure.
put sneakers on in gym class.
Exactly. Now listen. So I'm gonna answer or get you to answer a question here because somebody asked. So
Yeah.
we've talked a little bit about squatting. So give us your thoughts on overhead squatting in a young population.
I would say the only person, if you're younger, the only person that needs to and that I would overhead squat with is an Olympic weightlifter or somebody who's interested in, again, we're using a tough word now, CrossFit, interested in getting into CrossFit style training. Other than that, it's fun but not necessary, and it kind of goes into something I had said earlier. If you're going to work out 5 to 6 times a week, go ahead, throw in some overhead squats. If you're going to work out maybe 2 or 3 times a week, they're not the most necessary thing in the world. I think they're good. They're fun. I did a million of them being an Olympic weightlifter, but I don't think they're the most necessary. I think maybe doing some very light ones is a pretty good idea because your mobility will never be tested more doing an overhead squat from your pinky down to your toes. If something's off, it's going to show you in an overhead squat. So they can be beneficial in that sense, but I don't find them the most necessary exercise for people to be doing.
Okay. Now let's change gears here a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of relates to our last topic. So let's talk a little bit about not just about physical fitness, physical literacy. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So physical literacy. In your mind, what is physical literacy? Number two, is it important? And if so, why?
I can kind of put those all together in a sense. I think there is, like, I guess you could say, a definition for physical literacy. I find it just like, I define it as just like being able to like know what's going on in your body, right? If I say flex your bicep, flex your quad, bend your knees, flatten your back, things like that, where it's just like, I don't have to push you in a certain position. I kind of define it as that. And that's something I try and do with a lot of kids that I work with. It's just like, explore your body. Like, you don't need to know how many muscles are in the bottom of your foot, but like, you should know what your hamstring is, you should know what your quad is. And like, so if I'm across the room with somebody and I'm like, hey, do this with your upper back, you're not like, wait, this muscle. So
what?
Yeah, and basic stuff. And I find it very important because actually the example I just used unintentionally is it's a safety thing, because I do teach adults, and I teach adults in group fitness classes. And, I'll never forget the time I started with somebody new and I was like, okay, bend at the hip, and her knees bent. And I was like, what? And I don't, 40, 45, 50, I don't know. And I was just so like, huh? And
Your other hip.
yeah. And it's just like, but that's, it's, to a lot of people, it doesn't seem that important, but it is, because if I'm across the room and I'm like, hey, do this, you should be able to kind of be able to adjust yourself in certain scenarios. And if I don't get to you in time, it takes one rep, and now it's, now it puts you out. So I find it very important because I think it's a safety thing. I think it's a really good way to just, maximize your lifts, because there are certain cues, like, let's say I'm deadlifting. I tell somebody, turn your lats on. That might not make any sense to them. Or I'm like, hey, do this, do that. You can't maximize on certain lifts if you don't know how to kind of like turn certain muscles on yourself and have a general idea of how to move your body.
It's interesting, I have a lot of patients that come to me for various ailments, and you can see the people, when you ask them to do a particular thing, oh, let me see, I want to assess your hip range of motion and your knee range of motion and your ankle. So let me see your squat, and you watch them squat, and you instantaneously, you can say, oh, this person has not done any movement before. Not that they have to be a professional squatter, but you just know this person has not been engaged in physical activity because they don't understand at all how their body works and how their joints move and what they need to do to get into a particular position. And it's funny, I when I talk to people about this, the way that I look at this is that physical activity is a language, okay? Just the same way as you are speaking, we are speaking English, or I might speak French or Russian or whatever. Physical movement is a language, right? And there are different dialects of that language, which might be the different sports or different things, but physical movement is a language, and it's made up of letters, vowels, consonants. It's made up of phrases, sentences. And if you look at somebody like Michael Jordan, he was speaking the language of basketball at like the highest level. He's like the Shakespeare of basketball, right? And so when I think of physical literacy, I think about teaching people the vowels, the letters, the consonants, the phrases of physical language so that they can speak. And then when you watch somebody move, they're speaking to you. They're not saying any verbal words, but they're saying physical words. And then you can get a sense of, can this person speak, coherently, or are they like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's all about.
Yeah, I like the way you phrase that. I do think it is a language, and I was actually thinking about this either yesterday or today, and I was realizing like that the way you were saying is teaching people, and I'm realizing as I work more and more with kids, and as I'm working with younger kids too, is they all have that language. And I think what I'm trying to do is make sure they don't forget it, because I think a lot of adults, they tend to forget it. So long story short, I have these Zoom workouts that I'm doing weekly. And every single one of them with the kids, I have a 7 to 11 group and then a 12 to 16 group. But every single one of them, we sit in the bottom of the squat for 1 minute. And every single one of them can get down there. Every single one. So like you were saying, that language is like, it's there. Now there's certain things. If I tell a kid to flatten his back out, he has no idea what I'm talking about. And that's totally understandable. But they have the ability to do all of it. And we want to try to get them to not forget it, because and I tell them all the time, I'm like, you should be able to sit in the bottom of this squat every
Do it
day, all
comfortably.
day, until you're 100 years old. Not that actually 100, but I'm like, you should be able to squat. You should be
Yep.
able to sit down there 30 seconds at least and get up. So I like the way you said that language thing, because I think that's a really good metaphor for it. And some people have that language and they can learn it, but some people forget it.
Yes. They forget. Well, that's the key. It's not that they can't learn it. It's that they have forgotten it. And another
Mm-hmm.
thing that I often say to people, if you ever want to see what a human being is meant to move like, go watch a toddler, man. Watch somebody who has not been tainted by school, not been tainted by not
Chairs.
been tainted by the outside world. That's what they are meant to do, and they do it naturally without thinking.
They
Right?
don't. Yep. They don't
Okay.
think. So yeah, somebody just put that in there. If you want to see how humans are supposed to move, look at a kid between 1 to 5 years old, untainted. You're right.
That's my man Jethro. It's my
Oh
head
yeah,
physio. Yeah, yeah.
love it.
So
It's
so
true. They
that's
move.
a
They
big
move
thing.
perfect.
So let me ask you something now then. So we have general movement skills, physical literacy, but what about now? Let's talk about youth fitness training and sports specialization, because my child's going to the NBA, right? My
Yes.
child is going to the NHL. My child's going to MLB. So I'm going to get him going in sports specialization camps now, today, every day. That's
Mm-hmm.
all he's going to do. So tell me, what are your thoughts? You train athletes, you train young people. What are your thoughts on sports specialization as it pertains to youth fitness?
I I want I want to say I hate it. um, but well, I have an interesting view because I only played baseball, so I specialized. My batting average didn't agree with me, but I specialized in baseball, and also like I'm feeling the ramifications of that my hips are not normal. I have problems doing like regular deadlifts sometimes, and I feel that because it's just over and over and over again. And one, I think it's a huge issue for a couple of reasons. One, what happened to me, I'm all jacked up. Two, I got burnt out. By my senior year of high school, I was like, I love baseball, but I don't want to touch a bat until I don't know when. I'm good. I'm done with it. And I think that's a big problem. I think you're finding that with kids, especially now. Kids are on two teams at a time usually. And I'm going to use baseball as an example because that's just the one I know of for sure. Two teams at a time, spring, summer, and fall, and then they're doing stuff in the winter. It's just nonstop. No matter if you do something that often, you're going to get sick of it. It doesn't matter how old you are or what it is. You're going to get sick of it at some point. The same way we all get sick of our training regimen and want to go to something else sometimes. I think it's a real problem because I think kids are losing. They're losing that language, like you were just talking about, right? They're losing the language that they could be getting in other sports because they're specializing in one. And then when they turn 18 and they're not playing that sport anymore because they didn't make it to the NBA like everybody else, they lost different things that they could have learned in other sports. And, from a child standpoint, they didn't meet people they could have met. They didn't meet a coach that could have been a mentor. Same thing over and over. So they got hurt. It's so many kids are hurt because they're not athletes anymore. They're robots playing a sport. And doing the same motions over and over again is just going to lead to injury. Like I said way earlier before, it's not if, it's when. And I don't know if it's because I don't remember, but I don't think when I was 15 years old, anybody was hurt, like injured, hurt. No, I don't think anybody was. And it's just,
Mm-hmm.
it's so
Mm-hmm.
common now. I have parents bringing their kids in and their wrist is messed up, their elbow, their shoulder, their hip, their back. It's so many different things.
The early specialization is no good, right? Like
No.
it's most of those people are not going to end up in the. And I don't want to crush anybody's dreams. If you want to go for the NBA or NFL, then by all means work towards that. But sports specialization is not the route to it. And if you look at some of the most accomplished athletes in any sport, they are all multi-sport athletes, man.
Yep.
All of them multi-sport athletes. They learned how to move first as an athlete, not a particular sports specialist, but as an athlete, they learned how to move. And then they applied that athleticism to a sport usually in their late teens, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let me ask you something now. We're getting close to the time, so we're gonna do a couple more questions. Healthy living, okay?
Yep.
If you have a kid that comes in now and you're trying to prepare that kid to educate them, train them, and help prepare them for a life that's going to be healthy beyond Pat Damiano,
Yep.
what are your guidelines and what are you telling them? What are you teaching them?
I'll go two things because I'm happy you said that. That is my goal. And I tell all the parents that are like, oh, my kid plays baseball, this and that. If your kid never plays in the MLB, but he works out for the rest of his life because of what he learned with me, I could not be happier. If a kid walks in and he's like, hey, can we deadlift today? Yup. Can we do this? Yup. Can we do this? Yup. We might have to do some things you don't like, but find a couple movements or a type of exercise, a piece of equipment, find something you enjoy doing all the time. And so that's in the gym. Outside of the gym, put something healthy on your plate. You don't have to completely kick everything to the curb. Put something healthy on your plate because you will start to build the habit of that. So the biggest example I use all the time is breakfast. Oh, you had frosted flakes for breakfast? Fine. You're 14, eat frosted flakes. I don't care. But what I want you to also do is have 3 eggs with that, or a piece of toast with peanut butter, or something along those lines that's going to be healthy. Same thing with dinner or whatever. Put something healthy on it. You can still eat lasagna. I don't care. Just put some broccoli on the plate next to it. You start to build the habit of putting healthy things on your plate, even if there is something not so great with it, because again, you are a kid, you got to live. That's going to really build a habit of starting to make your plates a little bit healthier.
Move on to a more broader topic, and that is youth fitness education.
Mm-hmm.
How important do you think that is? Because people are not necessarily going to train with you forever. So, how
Mm-hmm.
important do you think youth fitness education is? And how is it that you accomplish that with your clients and the people that you work with?
Yeah, I think it's super important because I'm sure you've seen a bunch of them too, and we've all seen the athlete that works out like crazy, and as soon as they're done playing a sport, they just gain 30 pounds because they kind of got into like, oh, I just work out for my sport or I just work out with my team. And I think a lot of people fall into that rut and never actually, like, they almost turn into a robot. So then when their career's over and they have no one to tell them how to work out, they're like, oh, what do I do? Okay, I'll jog a little and do some curls and go home. So I think
Right.
that part is really important, trying to tell them why we do certain things so that when they're done with me or when they're done with their sport, they can start structuring workouts on their own, which is why for a lot of times when I post, I just post the same. I post a workout, but I post my format. Here, do a single leg exercise. Which one? I don't care. Just do one. Like, pick one. Which one do you like to do? Do that one. Or do an explosive movement. Which one? The one that's going to, like, get you excited to do. So I think that type of it is just a format, just a blueprint. Hey, you can do this exercise, this. Which pressing motion? The one you like. So I think that's really important, is just teaching them how to, like, maybe format stuff. And also something I was saying before is enjoying it, knowing that I'm having a bad day. I'm stressed. I haven't worked out a little bit. What's the workout that I know is going to I'm going to enjoy it. It's going to probably put me in a better mood. It's going to help me just kind of like zone out. I think that's another really important part for kids to start to learn how to learn, is which exercises they start to like. Maybe they like to row, maybe they hate running, or maybe they hate the bike but like to run. Learning those things I think is really important, because that's going to touch on the mental aspect of training and not just the physical parts of it.
Okay. 2 more questions before we finish up.
Hit me.
Okay. So number one, patients ask me this all the time. Their parents ask me this, and I'm sure our answer will be the same. But so strength training in young children. Oh my God, is it safe? Am I going to kill my children? Am I going to stunt their growth? What are your thoughts on strength training in the young population?
Definitely stunts growth. Don't do it. No. It doesn't. I think that myth has been beyond proven wrong, or been proven a myth, however you want to say it.
Yep.
I think what I found, and this is actually part of the reason why I enjoy sandbags with kids. I think it's just the notion of it, and I think something that kids would do is just, you can load up a kid. They're strong. Your kid they can pick their dog up, no problem. They can pick their brother up and carry him across the room, no problem. They're strong. They can handle a lot. They recover extremely quick. It's just teaching them how to do it the right way and not scaring the parents. So going back to that sandbag thing, if I put a sandbag on the floor and tell a kid to pick it up, his parent will be like, cool. If I magically turn that sandbag into a barbell and some plates, they're like, ah.
Don't do that.
It's just a mental thing. So unfortunately, in the field that I'm in, you kind of have to give and take a little bit. But it's just ensuring the parents that it is safe. It's going to make them stronger. It could even help them grow a little bit by releasing some of that testosterone. But it's an unfortunate thing that people are still kind of stuck on, that they think is a bad thing, when it's really just going to do the complete opposite of what all of them think. And you'll notice the parents that work out consistently have no problem with their kids lifting, and the parents that don't work out at all think it's dangerous, and that's not a coincidence. And it starts with them sometimes, but I think it's great. They got to do it. It's good for them. It's just going to make them a better person overall.
I think if you're familiar with the UFC at all, and if you know who Francis Ngannou is, Francis Ngannou is one of the super heavyweights in the UFC, and he came from Africa. I can't remember whether he came from Cameroon or where exactly he came from, but I think it was Cameroon. And he did childhood labor in the mines. Okay, and I don't think anybody would look at Francis Ngannou and go, his growth was stunted. That dude is wall-to-wall muscle, and he was doing enforced hard labor as a child in the mines. So, yeah, I don't think it stunts your growth.
No, real quick on that one, the one kind of like metaphor I always want to say to parents, I'm like, if I told you your kid was going to go work on a farm for 4 months, would you be fine with that? Yup. Okay, then they can lift.
That's right. That's right. Exactly. Okay, so we got like 3 minutes left. I'm going to give you 2 minutes to talk about David Goggins. I posted that up on social media, and I asked you about that before, but I think he's an interesting character. So give me your 2-minute spiel on how that came about and what it was like to work with that guy, and what was your observations.
So, long story short, I met him. My boss's best friend is a fitness influencer named Brian Mazza, who started a little like retreat called HPLT, High Performance Lifestyles Training. Long story short, the first weekend that he held it, he had David Goggins as the main speaker. The people who signed up for the weekend got to work out with him. So I was one of them. We ran 1,000 miles up and down New York City. We stopped when he felt like it. We stopped and did jumping jacks and push-ups until he felt like moving on, and then we just followed him. It was literally like he was a rabbit, and we just picked our shit up and went with him when he went. It was amazing. It was extremely difficult. It was running, jumping jacks, and push-ups, and I was smoked, so don't ever sleep on the basics. I still am. I was very, very, very in deep in like hardcore Goggins. One thing I will say is he looks like he is jacked the hell up from all the stuff that he does to his body. So he is definitely broken down, which is no surprise, but he's a badass. It was an unbelievable thing meeting him, and it was a really cool experience that once in a lifetime.
So before we finish up, young man, first I have to say this was a amazing experience talking with you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much again for participating and sharing your knowledge with us. So please give us your information on your socials so all these people know where to follow you and where we can find what you're doing.
Cool. First off, I want to say thank you. This was a ton of fun. I really enjoyed all of the topics. I love talking about this stuff, and I could talk for another 5 hours if I needed to. Obviously, this is my Instagram, at Pat Damiano with an underscore. Still can't get my just my regular name. My TikTok is the same exact thing, at Pat Damiano underscore. My YouTube, which is fresh and new, is Pat Damiano Performance. And then I actually just launched my website the other day, which is P Damiano Performance. So I might need to make all this the same at one point, but for now, that's everything I've got.